They lied to me, told me I wasn't enough. That my children weren't as lovable as my sisters. They manipulated, dismissed, and betrayed me, all while expecting me to stay. To keep playing my part in their twisted family dynamic. But they never saw me. Never valued me. Now, they want me back, only because they need something. I was never family to them. Just a convenience. I stood at the airport gate. My suitcase in one hand. My boarding pass in the other. Feeling something I hadn't felt in years, anticipation. This trip was supposed to be a rare break. A chance to remember who Jade was. Beyond the everyday roles of mother, provider, and the responsible one in a family that rarely noticed her sacrifices. My parents had been planning this adults-only getaway for months, insisting it would be a special time to reconnect. No kids, Mom had repeated over and over, her voice full of reassurance. You deserve a break, sweetheart, just relax and enjoy yourself. I had done everything to make it possible, left detailed instructions for my best friend. Stocked the fridge, video called my kids twice before heading to the airport. I had silenced the guilt that always came with leaving them behind. Reminding myself that for once, it was my turn to be taken care of. As I stood there, watching the flight information flicker across the screen, I let out a breath. Maybe this was exactly what I needed. Maybe, for once, this was my moment. But as the departure doors opened and my sister Olivia strolled in, 3 children in tow, my stomach dropped. Something was very, very wrong. I blinked, my fingers tightening around the handle of my suitcase as I took in the scene before me. Olivia, my sister, breezed through the airport entrance, juggling 3 backpacks, a diaper bag, and a coffee cup, while her 3 kids trailed behind her, chattering excitedly. My breath caught in my throat. No, this wasn't happening. This was supposed to be an adults-only trip. No kids. That was the one thing my parents had been adamant about. Mom turned, saw my expression, and gave me a casual wave, as if this were perfectly normal. Oh, Jade, don't look so surprised, she said, adjusting the strap of her designer purse. It's different with Olivia's kids. Different. That word sliced through me like a blade. Wait, I said slowly, my voice eerily calm. You told me I couldn't bring my kids because this was a trip for adults. Dad chuckled, like I was overreacting. Oh, honey, Claire's kids are no trouble at all. No trouble at all. My mind reeled, my chest tightened. I had left my babies behind, my sweet, perfect children, because my parents had insisted it wasn't a trip for kids. And now, here was Olivia, standing there with all 3 of hers like it was nothing. I turned to my sister, searching for some kind of explanation, but she just shrugged, smirking. Relax, Jade, my kids are used to traveling. You won't even notice they're here. I felt the ground shift beneath me, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had spent years swallowing the favoritism, the subtle ways my parents always chose Olivia over me. But this was different. This was deliberate. They had lied to me, looked me in the eyes and lied, knowing I would never agree to leave my kids behind if Olivia got to bring hers. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. Unbelievable, I whispered. Mom sighed dramatically, as if I was the one making a scene. Then she said it, the words that sent ice through my veins. We just love them more. The words rang in my ears, hollow and unforgiving. We just love them more. It was said so casually, like an afterthought, like it was something I should have already known. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to laugh, to backtrack, to realize what she had just said. But she didn't. She just stood there, adjusting her scarf as if she hadn't just shattered something inside me. I felt the sting in my chest before I even processed what it meant. A slow burning ache that started in my ribs and spread like wildfire through my veins. My jaw clenched, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Excuse me? My voice came out soft, controlled, but inside, a storm was brewing. Oh, Jade, don't be dramatic, Mom sighed, shaking her head. You're taking it the wrong way. The wrong way? How else was I supposed to take that? My gaze flickered to Olivia, who looked supremely unbothered, scrolling through her phone while her kids ran in chaotic circles around her. No remorse, no guilt, just the same smug confidence she always had. The kind that came from a lifetime of being the favorite. Dad let out an exasperated breath, already tired of the conversation. Jade, we just meant they're easier. They listen, they don't cause trouble. Something inside me snapped. So my kids, my children, are what? Difficult? Unlovable? I demanded, my voice rising, ignoring the few curious stares from travelers around us. Mom had the audacity to laugh, like I was some petulant child throwing a tantrum. Oh, sweetheart, don't be ridiculous. No one's saying that. But you were saying that. I shot back. You told me to leave my kids behind. Lied to me. And now Olivia waltzes in with hers like it's normal. And I'm just supposed to accept it? Olivia finally looked up, smirking. Jade, you're overreacting. It's not a big deal. I took a slow, steady breath, but my hands still trembled with barely restrained fury. This wasn't just about a trip. This was about years of being treated as second best. And now, I was done pretending it didn't hurt. I stood there, suitcase in one hand, betrayal sitting heavy in my chest like a stone. The past played in my mind like a cruel montage. Every birthday where Olivia's kids got the bigger gifts. Every holiday where mine were an afterthought. Every time I bit my tongue and told myself this is just how they are. Not anymore. I exhaled, steadying myself. My parents watched me expectantly, waiting for me to fall in line like I always had. But this time, I didn't. I let go of the suitcase handle, letting it drop with a quiet thud. You know what? My voice was calm, dangerously calm. You've made it pretty clear where I stand, where my kids stand, and I refuse to keep playing a game I was never meant to win. Mom's brows furrowed. Jade, don't be dramatic. No, I cut her off, straightening my spine. I had spent years shrinking myself, making excuses, swallowing the pain, but not today. You lied to me. You made me leave my kids behind because you didn't think they were good enough for this trip. Do you have any idea how cruel that is? Dad sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose like I was the difficult one. We thought you'd enjoy yourself more, Jade. I let out a bitter laugh. Enjoy myself? Watching Olivia's kids take the place where mine should have been? I shook my head, jaw tight. You didn't do this for me. You did this because Olivia and her kids always come first. Silence. Olivia crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. God, you're exhausting. I turned to her, my heart pounding but my voice unwavering. You're right. I am exhausted. Exhausted from trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me to have one. I grabbed my suitcase, this time with purpose. Enjoy your trip, I said, voice steady, but don't expect me to be waiting when you get back. And with that, I walked away, because this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one leaving. And I was never coming back. The drive home was eerily quiet. No music, no distractions. Just the hum of the engine and the echoes of their voices replaying in my mind. We just love them more. The words were seared into my brain, cutting deeper with every repetition. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. For years, I had convinced myself that the favoritism wasn't that bad, that it wasn't personal, that if I just tried harder, was more patient, more understanding, more grateful, they would eventually see me, see my kids. But tonight, all those illusions had shattered. My parents had looked me in the eye and told me, without a hint of shame, that my children weren't worth the same love and effort as Olivia's. And worse, they expected me to accept it. Not anymore. As I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered on, casting a warm glow against the dark. My real home, my real family. I stepped out of the car, inhaling deeply, trying to shake the weight of what had just happened. Before I could even close the door, a small figure came barreling toward me. Mommy. Emily's curls bounced as she threw her arms around my legs, hugging me tightly. Noah peeked from behind her. His little face scrunched with worry. Why are you back so soon? I knelt down, smoothing back Emily's hair and cupping Noah's cheek. Because I missed you, I said softly. Because you deserved to come first for once. Sarah, my best friend and the only one I trusted with my babies, stepped into the doorway. Her eyes met mine, and I knew she saw it. The exhaustion, the heartbreak, the finality. Jade, she started, but I shook my head. Later, I murmured, standing up. Tonight, I just want to be home. And for the first time in my life, I understood what that truly meant. My parents had made their choice. Now, I was making mine. I wasn't going to waste another second chasing a love that would never come. Instead, I was going to pour everything I had into the people who mattered, my kids, my friends, and most importantly, myself. The morning after I cut them off, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. There were no missed calls to dread, no messages laced with guilt, no expectations I had to live up to. Just the soft sound of my kids giggling in the living room and the scent of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was free. But freedom, I quickly realized, came with a satisfying kind of vengeance. 3 weeks passed before I heard from them again. My father's name flashed across my screen, followed by a string of missed calls from my mother. Then Olivia. Then a message from my dad. Short and to the point. Call us. It's important. I didn't. By the time Sarah called, I already knew something had happened. You won't believe this, she said, her voice practically buzzing through the phone. Your parents, they need you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? She let out a laugh, the kind laced with the sweet satisfaction of karma finally coming full circle. They're in trouble, Jade. Big trouble. Turns out, Olivia's husband lost a ton of money in a bad investment. They were counting on your parents to bail them out. But, she paused for effect, without your financial help, they can't. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smirk creeping onto my lips. Let me guess. Now, suddenly, I matter? Oh, they're desperate, Sarah confirmed. Your mom has been telling everyone she doesn't understand why you're acting out and refusing to support the family. The family that left your kids behind at the airport. Mind you. Satisfaction curled in my chest like a fire, warm and unrelenting. For years, I had been their safety net, the one they ignored until they needed something. But now they had to face the consequences of choosing Olivia over me. I took a sip of my coffee, exhaling in relief. Well, I said, my voice dripping with amusement. I guess they'll have to figure it out themselves. And just like that, the weight I had carried my entire life was no longer mine to bear. It didn't take long for their desperation to turn into full-blown panic. At first, they tried to manipulate me the way they always had, soft, pleading messages from my mother, passive-aggressive guilt trips from my father, and a few half-hearted attempts at emotional blackmail. Family sticks together. Jade, don't you care about us? You're being selfish. You'll regret this when we're gone. Gone. That word sat heavily on my chest. But not in the way they intended. They were already gone to me. In the ways that mattered. They had chosen Olivia and her children at every turn, while my kids and I were treated as an afterthought. Now that their golden child had steered them into financial ruin, I was supposed to step in and save them? Not this time. A week after their last pathetic attempt at reconciliation, I got a text from Olivia herself. I almost didn't open it. I had no interest in whatever sob story she was about to spin. But curiosity got the best of me. Jade, whatever grudge you're holding, it's time to let it go. We're family. This is bigger than you. If you really care about mom and dad, you'll do the right thing. The right thing. I laughed, actually laughed, as I stared at the message. The audacity was almost impressive. The same woman who had spent her life being catered to, coddled, and handed everything she ever wanted was now demanding that I fix her mistake? I let the message sit there, unread, I wanted her to know what it felt like to be ignored. Dismissed. Insignificant. And then, for good measure, I blocked her. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their burdens. I wasn't the fixer, the forgotten daughter, the backup plan. I was free. That night, as I tucked my kids into bed, my daughter looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, are we gonna see Grandma and Grandpa soon?" I kissed the top of her head, pulling her close. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, "not anymore." And for the first time, that answer felt right. The first time I woke up without the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. I felt something unfamiliar, lightness. For years, I had lived my life trying to fit into the mold they had carved out for me. I had been the quiet daughter, the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for too much because she knew it wouldn't be given. But now, there was no mold to fit into, no role to play, no apologies to make for simply existing. I was free. And with that freedom came power. For the first time in my life, I made decisions only for myself and my children. I stopped second-guessing, stopped hesitating, stopped waiting for approval that was never going to come. I started saying yes to opportunities I would have turned down before out of fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear that I wasn't enough. But I was enough. I had always been. I took on new projects at work. Ones that challenged me, ones that proved just how capable I was. I made plans for my future, our future, without worrying whether my parents or Olivia would approve. And when I bought a home, a place that was mine, something shifted inside me. No more waiting, no more hoping they'd see my worth. I saw it myself. Then came the moment I didn't realize I needed until it happened. I was at the grocery store with my kids when I spotted Olivia across the aisle. For a moment, she just stared, like she couldn't believe I existed outside of the version of me she had always dismissed. Then she smiled, smug, entitled, like she still expected me to fall in line. But I didn't. I met her gaze, unbothered, confident, and I turned away. Not with anger, not with resentment, just disinterest. And that, I realized, was true freedom. They no longer had power over me. I had taken it back. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. For the first time in my life, I was no longer looking back, no longer replaying conversations in my head, no longer wondering what I could have done differently to make them love me the way I had always hoped they would. The past had lost its grip on me. And as I sat in my new home, surrounded by the life I had built, I realized something. I didn't just escape them. I had won. Winning didn't look like revenge or grand gestures. It wasn't about making them pay for what they did. It was waking up every morning without the weight of their opinions crushing me. It was watching my children laugh, knowing they would never feel like they were less than anyone else. It was sitting in my living room, drinking coffee in peace, while they were likely sitting in their own mess, wondering why I never came back. They had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough, that I was always second to Olivia, that my children were afterthoughts. They expected me to need them. They counted on it, but I had built something better, without them. That realization settled over me one afternoon when I received a message from my mother. The words were careful, forced. "We should talk. This has gone on long enough." Gone on long enough for who? Because I wasn't suffering. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't drowning without them. If anything, I was finally breathing. I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. No response. No explanation. Silence. That was my answer. A year ago, that message would have sent me spiraling, desperate to make things right. But now, it meant nothing, because I had nothing left to give them. And for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. I closed my phone and turned back to my kids, who were waiting for me at the kitchen table, their little faces bright with excitement. My past was behind me. And my future, the one I chose, was right in front of me. It was poetic. Really, how the people who spent years treating me like an afterthought were now the ones desperately trying to pull me back into their world. I wasn't surprised when the first signs of their downfall started to surface. I had always known that their version of stability was an illusion, built on favoritism and entitlement. But illusions don't last forever. And when reality finally came knocking, they had no one left to turn to, except me. The message from my father arrived late one evening, long after I had stopped expecting anything meaningful from them. "Jade, we need to talk. It's important." I almost laughed. Important had never included me before. But I was curious, so I waited, sipping my tea as more messages rolled in. It didn't take long for the truth to reveal itself. Claire's perfect life was crumbling. Her financial situation, so carefully hidden behind extravagant vacations and designer bags, had finally caught up with her. She was in debt, drowning in it, and my parents, who had always bailed her out, were now feeling the consequences. The money they had so carelessly thrown at her had dried up. And with it, their illusion of control. And now, they needed me. I let the message sit there, untouched, the weight of my own satisfaction settling in. This was the same family that had told me Claire needed things more than I did. The same family that had cast me aside, left my children out of their plans, and expected me to accept it. And yet, when they finally faced the consequences of their own choices, I was supposed to be their savior? I smiled as I typed my response. "I hope Claire finds someone willing to help her the way you always helped her. But it won't be me. Take care." And then I blocked their numbers. For years, they had treated me like I didn't matter, like I was disposable. Now, they knew what that really felt like. Poetic justice, indeed. No leverage, no guilt to wield like a weapon, no expectation I felt obligated to meet. And I think that terrified them more than anything. Days passed, then weeks. I expected more attempts to contact me, more manipulative messages disguised as concern. But after my final response, there was nothing. Maybe they finally understood that I was serious. Or maybe they had simply run out of ways to try and reel me back in. Either way, I wasn't looking back. Instead, I focused on myself, on my kids, on the life I had built that had nothing to do with them. And the longer I stayed away, the more I realized something. I was free. Free from the constant feeling of never being good enough. Free from bending over backward just to earn the smallest scraps of attention. Free from the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was just another attempt from my family to reach me. But something told me to pick up. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a familiar voice, hesitant and unsure. "It's Claire." For a moment, I was stunned into silence. Claire, the sister who had spent her entire life taking what she wanted, always assuming there would be no consequences, was calling me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice even, but sharp enough to remind her that I wasn't the same person she used to manipulate. She exhaled, a long, shaky breath. I need help." Of course, she did. That was the only reason she would reach out. But the difference now? I didn't owe her anything. I let her sit in the silence, waiting for a response, and then, just as she opened her mouth to speak again, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left waiting. She was. I stood at the edge of my new beginning, the weight of my past finally lifting from my shoulders. For so long, I had been trapped in a cycle of seeking approval, of bending to expectations that were never meant to include me. But not anymore. I had reclaimed my life, my happiness, and most importantly, my worth, not by proving anything to them, but by realizing I had nothing left to prove. My kids and I thrived without the family that once made me feel like I was never enough. My home was filled with laughter, not obligation. My heart was filled with love, not resentment. I had built something far greater than their validation, I had built peace. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching my children chase fireflies, I realized something powerful. I won. Not in a petty, vengeful way, but in the way that mattered. I had broken free from the cycle, from the burden of their judgment. I had taken control of my own story, and I had rewritten it in my own terms. Somewhere out there, they were still waiting for me to come back, to apologize, to beg for a place at their table. But I had already built my own.